Hi there, thanks for watching this recording. Today we're going to talk about some regular maintenance for TM1 or Planning Analytics. We're going to talk about running nightly backups, how to check the log folder, maybe you need to clear out some old log files that could be cluttering up a disk, and also checking disk space and any patching protocols that we need to be aware of. So first let's just talk through a couple in turn. So on a nightly basis, you do want to be backing up your TM1 data folder. Typically there should be a bunch of disk files in that folder. You'll also be wanting to run a save data all process. That should just be scheduled to run on a nightly basis. The save data all process will just make sure everything that's saved everything that's in memory is saved to disk. That way if you just back up that folder and some kind of a disaster happens, you can recover right up to the point that you got the data off the disk. Even if you're not doing that, with the transaction log information that's there, you'd be able to recover as well. It's just a very clean recovery or transfer. Maybe you want to set up a new server with the same data. If you run a save data all, you can be guaranteed that everything's been saved to the disk. You can just copy those files to a different server and set that up as a new instance. The log folder itself has a couple of key files in it. The tm1s.cfg, that's the configuration file. It's always going to be called that same name. The location may change, but that's a text file that's going to have a lot of detail around what is configured for your particular TM1 instance. Disk space, there's really nothing complicated about checking disk space. That's just logging onto the server, making sure that there's sufficient disk space available. TM1 doesn't need a lot of disk space. I would say you should always have 5 to 10 gigs of free space available on a system drive or on a data drive. If you find you're getting less than that, it's a good time to clear out old log files. Maybe there's some old backup files that you don't need anymore that are just cluttering up, taking up space. But always be sure that you've got some space left on the drive, because you just don't want the server to crash because it runs out of disk space. And patching protocol. So IBM typically releases updates for Planning Analytics. It seems to be on a quarterly basis. I recommend you just check the IBM Passport Advantage website occasionally, 2-3 times a year, just to see if there's updates for Planning Analytics. Unless you run into some kind of an issue that is preventing you from doing something, there's not a huge need to keep up on a quarter-by-quarter patching schedule. If there's a major release that comes out, then you will probably want to install that on a development environment, check it out, just run some tests that make sure your environment, your templates, your reports and processes all work right. And then if it passes your testing, then you can update it in production as well. But there's not, for this type of solution, there's not the same kind of monthly server patching that you'd see for like a Windows operating system or some other server products. The patching that happens here is typically, it's just bug fixes and new features that are released. And again, that's all available in the IBM Passport Advantage website. So here we are, we're logged into the IBM TM1 Architect tool. Now when it comes to maintenance, this should be the first point of contact. Make sure you can log in and it comes up at least. When you open up processes, even if you don't have a process that does save data all, you can right click on the instance name and say save data. That's going to force all the data to disk. You can also create a new process. The save data process itself is actually fairly straightforward. We're going to create one right now, so we're going to say the data source is none. There's no variables. We go to the Advanced tab. There's no parameters. On the Prolog tab, there's just one command, save data all. We'll save that. Give it a name. It's saved successfully, no error messages. Just run it. Ran successfully, that's fine. Now, just as an example, what I mean by having this run on a nightly basis, here we have our process that we just created that runs a save data all. As a chore, you can create a new chore, select just that one. If there were parameters, you could set the parameters. In this case, there aren't any parameters to do. You want to activate the chore. You want it to run every 1 day. This is a preference. I like to run them around 11:30 at night, kind of the end of the day. So the backup is inclusive of the work from that day. Here's going to give it a name for the chore. See, save data all. Now we have a chore right here, and whenever we want to, we can run the chore, and everything's fine. So, also from this view, from a maintenance perspective, you can always come in here and look at the, where is it? The transaction log and the message log. The transaction log is going to you'll be able to filter by a particular person or a particular cube or a date range to look at changes that have happened in the system across that different date range. The message log is going to give you a running list of all messages that have been logged to the system. So typically there's going to be lots and lots of these info messages, and we'll go, if you see an error or you see a warning, those will be the ones I'd want to investigate further. Sometimes if you see an error, you'll be able to double click on the item and get more information. Now let's say we do want more information. Where do we go for more details on this? So on the file system, there's going to be a location for this tm1s.cfg file, and there's also going to be a location for the tm1server.log. So let's look at the tm1s.cfg first. So this is the tm1s config file. There's a bunch of stuff in here. This one is well documented. It explains what each of these different features means. Any line with a pound symbol in the front is really just a comment. Anything without that is really setting something. So here we've got server logging is turned off. Integrated security mode, so this is how are folks authenticated, and a bunch of other things in here. One thing in particular that's relevant for this conversation is, well, where is the database directory, where is the actual data stored, and similarly, where are the logs stored. So let's see if I can find the logs. Yeah, so it's a long file, but it also identifies where the log files are in here. The tm1server.log file is where that will be it's a file, a text file that sits in the log folder, that every time there's an info message or a warning or an error, it's logged to this file. So this is a good one to start any kind of investigation if a server's crashed or if something's gone wrong. You can open this file and get a listing of all the details that's happened in the system. Anytime you start a server, you'll see session start, and it'll give you some details around, okay, well, what Team1 build are we looking at here? Sometimes there's other extra information you maybe want to look at. Here we can see this server set to use parallel interaction, which I recommend. Servers threading per connection, which is a good thing to do. I could look at more detail here if we really wanted to. So let's say everything looks good here, server's running fine. We've got our process running on a nightly basis to run the save data all. We always want to come in here and maybe clear up some disk space. So here's the folder. In this case, I've got all my logs and data, everything in the same folder, which can be quite common. I don't recommend that, but it can be quite common. So the question goes, well, how do I figure out what I need and what I don't need? So I would typically open up that folder. I sort it by type, and you'll start to get a feel for the different types of files here. RUX files, are rule files, PRO files, are process files. .log are the log files. So I can come in here and I can delete some of these. Now the TM1 log file, I cannot open that. You'll get an error message like this saying it's in use by another process. This is one, it is a log file, but it cannot be opened, so it cannot be deleted either. But I can come here and I can just delete those files, clear up some space, and that's perfectly fine to do. There's also dim files, which are the dimensions, CUB files, which are the cubes. BLB files are cached feeder files, so they represent if you've got persistent feeders turned on. That's the feeder information that's loaded to memory is stored to a file, and that makes the startup of the TM1 instance much faster when you have persistent feeders turned on. And .cho are chores. So just to recap, we've talked about how you do backup nightly. We've talked about clearing out the log folder. Checking disk space is just something to do on a regular basis, and if you need to clear up some disk space, I recommend clearing out the log folder. Also, patching protocols, we just talked about that TM1 or Planning Analytics, they seem to be about every quarter. It's not required to stay right up to date. Certainly you can do that if you choose to, but occasionally look for the messages on the IBM Passport Advantage website relevant to the products that you purchased, and it'll have all the details around downloading updates. And if you have any questions or concerns about applying those updates, feel free to reach out to us. That's what we like to do. That's what we do. Thanks.